Now, you have 1 minute and 12 seconds. Okay, Lego. G'day, guys. G'day. Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down every single NFL game every week from a punting perspective. This week will be the divisional round, but before we get started, an absolutely epic wildcard round last week. One of the better wildcard rounds that I can remember in recent history anyway. Pretty much 3 out of those 4 games were absolutely fantastic. Jacob, what did you think?
Oh, yeah, it was a hell of a weekend. So wildcard weekend is an elimination round, as all the playoffs are. We take the top 2 seeds from each conference. They had a bye. They're playing this weekend that we're going to preview. You get left with the other 2 division winners in each conference and the 4 sides that got a wild card by virtue of best record and had it all. I mean, we went 5-3 on our plays. Yes. We're going to have a little chat about each game because I think let's look back before we look forward to what we learned, and also just any talking point you had, because let's just celebrate they were ripping games. And I was going to say we could have easily gone 7-1 rather than 5-3. I think we were very unlucky in the 4th of the games, but hey, we also copped a lot of luck in probably the first game, and 3 of them. Well, actually, all 4 come down to the wire. All 4 games are 1-possession games, and you can't win them all. But it had a bit of everything, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the first one we'll go through was the game that was on the Saturday American time. It was the Texans beating the Bills 22-19 in overtime. Absolutely cracking game. We were on the Texans in that one. A couple of the best bets, like you said, Jacob, got a little bit lucky in that one. We had Texans laying 2.5 points. Obviously, that cashes in overtime. And same with Texans race to 20. That cashes in overtime as well. Texans dug themselves a bit of a hole early on. What were they down? 16-zip, to start the second half, and then nearly fucking blundered it and gave away the game. Catching the kickoff and just passing it to the ref without taking a knee. Lucky they overturned that, because honestly, if the Bills got 23-0 there, the game's pretty much over. But look, the difference in this one, and we kind of said this, and it was the reason why we took the Texans, was just we did trust Deshaun Watson more. And look, in overtime, he made one of the better plays that I've seen in overtime in a playoff game in probably the last 10 years. Getting sacked from both sides, somehow evades it and makes like a 30-yard pass downfield to set up the game-winning field goal. So, look, both teams pretty even, I think. I think we got lucky to cash a couple of those bets. But honestly, I think that the Texans deserve to win that one.
I don't even know if I'll give them the credit that they deserve to win. I don't think we can say we were on the right side. Yes, we laid -2.5. And the beauty is we talk all the time about the key number of 3. And when 100%. You lay -2.5, that's the best number to be laying when your team is losing, because so often the team that's down, they can't, when they come back, they, inevitably tie the game often before they then go and take a lead, often by a field goal. And what was most crazy about this game was just the swings in win probability, who you thought was going to win. Your first half, Josh Allen was excellent. I mean, breaks out like a 40-yard run on the second play, catches the opening touchdown, which was their touchdown on their first possession. The Texans could get nothing going. Watson, who we thought would be the far superior QB, had under 50 yards passing, could not bring his, all-world wide receiver Hopkins into it. Fuller was ruled out pre-game. It was actually, 13-0 down first half. You're thinking they got to come out and score first drive. They nearly handed over a touchdown, but that got cleared up. They didn't score. They let the Bills extend another long drive. J.J. Watt gets that sack, which then at least on third down for the third straight time made the Bills settle for a field goal. And we always talk about when you have a third down in the red zone, that's a 4-point play. Because if you get that first down, it's usually first and goal. It's almost always a touchdown. Whereas if you get settled for a field goal, it's 3. And that's what undid the Bills, because after scoring 7 on their first drive, they added 3 more lots of 3 to get to 16-0. It wasn't quite enough. The Texans come back. And this is what I mean. Like, at 16-0, the Bills are 98% chance to win the game. Not just the lead, but the way they were playing. You would never have believed Texans. Then Texans all the way back, get the lead, get a sack on 4th and 23. They've got the ball, under a minute left. No timeouts for the Bills. They get stopped on 4th down and actually hand the Bills a lifeline. So the Texans go from them being a 97% win probability. Next thing we know, we're in overtime and we're back and forth and it's a miracle play. And I actually thought, a takeaway I had, I wasn't that impressed with Watson throughout the game. I thought quite often he couldn't evade the pass rush that well. He did get sacked 7 times. Ironic that in the end.
The O-lines. 90% of that is the O-lines.
They can't protect him. And another takeaway, the commentators went over and over about the effect of J.J. Watt. And it is true. I mentioned it. He got the sack, and that was the turning point. But if you throw an incomplete pass there on 3rd down, it's the same result. The Bills kick a field goal. J.J. Watt, no other tackles in the game. Yeah, he juiced the crowd up, and that home crowd helped them. They're not going to have that this week.
Yeah, 100% right. Sol, mate, get your priorities right. I know it's the same time as the basketball, but put that shit on record and watch the basketball after this. This is more important, mate. Next up, we had the Titans beating the Pats 20-13. I know me and Jacob were on opposite sides of that. We did have a side bet, and unfortunately, I went down on that one. I did think that the Pats would just be too good at home, but boy, was I wrong. The Titans just ran all over the Patriots in that one, and where the fuck is this Patriots defense that was world beaters, elite, getting 2 to 3 takeaways every single game for the first half of the season? I know we said that was unsustainable, and it certainly was. But geez, that Titans O-line just punished that Patriots defensive line, and Derrick Henry was able to run all over them. In the end, I think he had 34 carries for 160 yards, something like that. And it was weird just watching it. At some point, you're like, well, the Pats have just got to sell out for the run here. They can stop him. But they could just never get contact early enough. And once Derrick Henry built up, a bit of speed, once he gets contact, that guy's so big that he gets 3 to 4 extra yards. So they just pretty much did that all game, ground out the Pats. The funny part was at the end, I guess, using what Bill Belichick had done many times before, taking a delay of game, multiple times. And then the Pats even fucked themselves even more by having a false start. So that the Titans were able to wind what was nearly a minute and a half, I think, off the clock down the stretch of the 4th quarter. And that helped them win the game. But look, Titans did deserve to win that game. They were the better team. And now the questions have got to be asked, what's going to happen to the Pats and Tom Brady next year?
Yeah, a lot to unpack there. Start with the Titans. I think a really good call to shout out their O-line, because Derrick Henry is a monster, but they are blocking really well for him. They are a really strong unit. I spoke about how since they switched to Tannehill, they're scoring over 30 a game. So it's a great offense. They have playmaking wide receivers who actually did nothing in this game. A.J. Brown, who we thought could be a monster, was basically a non-factor. Even Tannehill, who's had a great year, I think he goes about 8 of 15 on passing. Makes a couple of big conversions.
Not part of the
on
game
3rd down late in that game, when they needed to keep the ball, he makes a couple of throws. But honestly, you do that in Foxborough, you shouldn't be able to win. But they won because Henry was phenomenal, just unstoppable. He gets into the secondary. Nobody wants to tackle him. But it's not just that. Their defense played really well. And this is where you always got to say, well, was it the Patriots really anemic on offense, or was it the Titans defense? It was a bit of both. I mean, there's a key moment. Try to rack my brain what the score would have been at the time. I think the Patriots might have been up 10-7 and driving all the way, get a first down literally on the 1 or 2 yard line. And then it's a tackle for loss, stop, and you force a field goal. I mean, the Patriots, the team that is 98% when they go QB sneak for 1 yard, they didn't want to do it with Brady. They don't have
a running back that's big enough to just punch it in from the 1. So
regardless, I mean, when do the Pats not get a touchdown when they need 1 yard from 4 plays? That would have been 17-7 lead. Instead, it's 13-7. Yep. And the Titans get a touchdown before the end of the first half and actually lead at 14-13. Then we had a scoreless 29 minutes of the second half. And let's talk about that play where Vrabel did out Belichick. Look, that was funny. And once he took the first delay of game on that punt and it was 4th and 9, then to take it again, then there was an offside. Then he took it again. Yeah. And actually over 2 minutes of the clock was burnt. And in the end, the Patriots had the ball with a lot less time to get a field goal. But I hated the decision to punt there. I was actually absolutely cursing Vrabel. It was 4th and 4. You've got 3 options. You can go for it. If you pick up that first down, you're pretty much going to score because you'd be inside the 30, which is at least worst case a longish field goal, right? Yeah. And they were up by 1 point at the time with still like 6 minutes to go. I want to go for it there. You have a second option. You kick the field goal. Now the Titans have been horrible field goal kicking all year. I understand. It's like a 50-yarder. Maybe is a 50-50 chance to kick it at best. Right. And if you miss, you're handing over great field position. But the reward of kicking that is it's the first points of the second half, and now the Patriots basically need a touchdown to beat you. He punts. And yes, he blew 2 minutes of the clock and he pissed off Belichick. But the Patriots got back to the 30 within 2 plays.
Yeah.
So all punting does is gains you because you're punting from like the 35, you gain 20, 25 yards, as opposed to the other 2 options, which is keeping possession and or extending your lead. I hated that call. They end up winning. No one criticizes it. But, it does. I do wonder if Vrabel got a little bit conservative there. He can't do that this week against Baltimore for sure.
Oh, 100%.
And you said what happens with Brady. So, I mean, I don't know if you've got a take, but here's how I see it. He's an unrestricted free agent, right? And he's been playing at the Pats on a discount. He's been getting well underpaid what he could demand in open marketplace. But he's well aware of that. He takes a bit less. It's a salary cap league. They can spend it on more, other positions. They are very frugal with their money. They don't overpay anybody. And what's the result of that? You get to play in 9 Super Bowls and you get to win 6 of them and your brand. And he gets to sell his health regime and gym's lifestyle business and brand. Makes hundreds of millions more than, the difference between getting paid under 20 mil as a starting QB when he could demand closer to 40.
Yes.
So the question is, does he go somewhere else? Look, the reality, the guy's 42 and didn't play very well this year. And again, it's like, who do you blame? Do you blame the fact he had terrible wide receivers? It's certainly part of it. But the way I see it is,
declined as well. Yep.
Yeah, like where else do you want to be? You've got the best coach. You've got a great defense. You've got continuity with your offensive line. You've got like the fans love you.
Right.
Like how many better situations are there? Because if you're implying that he can go to another team like a Chicago or I don't know, I'm trying to think of a team that is decent but has a shit QB. But they don't really have a shit QB. Like I actually think Rivers and Brady are pretty comparable this year. But Rivers was leading the NFL in yards. Like, this is my point. Like, there aren't that many teams that have a worse QB than Brady. And if you want to say, he goes to somewhere like Tampa Bay because it's in Florida, he gets, like, gun wide receivers to throw to. Yeah, but it's not a defense that can win you a title. So I don't really see a better situation for him. I ultimately think he's going to stay in New England.
No, I think he's going to stay as well. I was just saying, I mentioned the Chargers just because maybe he says to himself, look, if I can go to another team and win a Super Bowl, like, that would be so epic for him. And really, like, he's got to look at this season and say, fuck, I was throwing to absolute gimps, a banged up Edelman and no one else pretty much all season long. He goes to the Chargers, and not only does he get, like, Keenan Allen, he gets a few, good receivers. They've still got Austin Eckler there. Who knows what's going to happen
Mike
with
Williams, Melvin
backs.
Gordon.
Yeah. Who
Way
knows
better
what's
weapons.
going to happen with Melvin Gordon or whatever. But, from a Chargers perspective, I get that, maybe Brady is comparable to Rivers, but maybe they say to themselves, we're LA, fucking barely get any fans to come out to the fucking stadium, got a new stadium next year. Maybe that's a way for them to boost their profile, I guess, by signing someone like Tom Brady. But I'm with you. I think there's probably a 75 to 80% chance he does stay. The last game of the round, a bit disappointing, was the Seahawks beating the Eagles 17 points.
No, hang on. You missed...
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
You missed Kirk.
You're right.
Captain
You're
Kirk and the Vikings going into New Orleans.
You like that? Did you see that video of him afterwards? He
yes,
that
I
again.
did.
It's funny.
I love
the Vikings
that shit.
beat the Saints 26 points to 20. We were all over the Vikings in that one on the under as well. So we cashed all of those bets in that one. And the Vikings were the better team, to be honest. And the Saints fuck it up again in the playoffs. This time it wasn't necessarily because of a bad call. They just got outplayed throughout the game. Drew Brees was below average. He definitely didn't play as well as he had down the stretch. And we kind of said this, the Saints had been just steamrolling teams down that last 5-6 weeks of the regular season. But you look at some of those teams that they played, some of them were shit, some of them weren't trying. that kind of stuff. And this Vikings team, they have been very, very good recently. And Dalvin Cook was very good again, scored a couple of TDs. He'd been well rested, been out for a couple of weeks. He was a beast once again. And Kirk Cousins did enough. And I know that we've said, and we'll get to this when we talk about the Vikings 49ers game, a lot have been made about, Kirk Cousins being bad in primetime and all that kind of stuff. And you made the point, Jacob, a few weeks ago, that it's not actually Kirk Cousins being bad in primetime games. It's Kirk Cousins being bad when he's playing outside of that early 1 p.m. window games. Because it's been well documented that he's such a regimented, a guy that like plans his day down to the 15 minutes. That if he's anything outside of that time slot, he plays bad. So this was in the good time slot for him. Had a good game, and honestly, that play to Thielen to set up the game-winning touchdown, very, very epic. So we had two overtime games in the first in the wildcard round. I think it was Pick'em to have one overtime game, which is, I don't know if that's good odds. I think that's bad.
Oh, I think only like 1 in 20 games goes to overtime, so don't be betting any shit like that. But we were all over the Vikings.
But anyway.
And why? Because, and even though we said the Saints are probably the best team in the NFC, we just felt that the line shouldn't have been above a touchdown. No. I mean, they were getting +9. It might have creeped down to +8, but that's still a lot of points. And we said, and you alluded to it then, like the Saints looked amazing the last month of the season, but they played teams that were ready for the season to end. So that's kind of meaningless. And then the Vikings was the opposite. The Vikings played their final 2 games of the season with nothing to gain and played absolutely vanilla and didn't even try. And different story if the Vikings needed to win those games. Remember, they hosted Green Bay and then they hosted the Bears. They could have easily won those pair and they essentially punted on them both. And people are confused. Oh, what? The Vikings have been terrible the last fortnight. The Saints have been unbeatable. So why did this happen? But you've got to understand the context. And even in saying that, it goes to overtime. I don't want to say like it's so clear the Vikings outplayed them, but I do feel the better team won that game. And I feel that they are, because just the way the season played out down the stretch, it's disguised the fact the Vikings are among the elite teams. I really like you've got a great head coach and it's a massive head coaching matchup this weekend. It's a really quality defense too. Like if they do have a hole, it's probably their defensive backs. But I actually feel like the Saints couldn't exploit that because Drew Brees doesn't throw deep down the field. I think the deepest pass they completed was Taysom Hill coming out and throwing. So whereas they've got awesome linebackers and safeties, and I mean, and a pretty good defensive line too. Like the play I loved, which didn't quite win the game, but it did make a huge difference, is straight after they pick up a first down on a Taysom Hill run, they bring Drew Brees back out. Now they're in scoring range, and this is when the Saints were down just a field goal. And it's Danielle Hunter, who maybe doesn't get enough credit as being one of these star, defensive linemen in the NFL. And he gets around behind Brees. And I just love the fact that in the slow motion replay, he basically punches the back of Drew Brees' bicep. Yep. And it just makes his hand like spasm where he drops the ball. Because usually when they get strip sacked, the defender plays at the ball. Right. But he literally punched him in the back of the arm and this with so much force. Yep. And the ball shoots out. And the Vikings got the ball, chewed clock there. Ultimately, Saints got one last shot, but that last shot was only to tie, whereas that could easily been to win, or yes. he may have stopped a touchdown drive right there. They've got playmakers on both sides of the ball because you talked about how epic Dalvin Cook was now that he was fresh, and we can see if he is carrying a niggling shoulder injury, the fortnight off's done him the world of good. It gives them a real shot this week. But as you can see, the line has adjusted because they were catching 9 in New Orleans, and now they're catching 7 in San Francisco, 2 pretty comparable teams. Yep. And if anything, much better spot for San Francisco off a bye. So we'll talk about that one in a couple minutes.
Indeed we will, and we'll finish with the Seahawks beating the Eagles 17 points to 9. We were on the Eagles in that one, unfortunately, and look, this game is pretty much the story of Carson Wentz getting injured, and that was in the first quarter, and the Eagles just couldn't get anything going after that. I mean, they had a couple of sustained drives. I think in the fourth quarter they had 2 drives where they got into the red zone, came up empty. I just think the Seahawks were pretty disappointing in that game, really. I mean, you get an Eagles team without Carson Wentz, and you can only just manage to beat them. So I really think the Seahawks struggled. They did not impress me at all in that one. The only person that impressed me was DK Metcalf. Of course, he was on my fantasy team for a little while, and he fucking brings out 160 yards in this wildcard game. But yeah, just very, very disappointing for the Eagles, I guess, once again. But honestly, they weren't that much worse. I mean, they couldn't get much going without Wentz, but really, they had chances to tie that one down the stretch and just couldn't do it. And look, throughout the season, the Eagles were the best team in the red zone in terms of converting red zone opportunities to touchdowns. And obviously, twice in the fourth quarter, they get into the red zone. They don't have Carson Wentz. They can't do it. So, look, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But honestly, if Carson Wentz plays that entire game, the Eagles win.
Yeah, the way that I saw the game play out makes me feel very confident we had the right pick. And like a game that was pretty much 50-50, but we got the Eagles plus 2.5, and they close a favourite. And I do believe, yeah, things can happen in a game, and it would have still been maybe close. But Seattle didn't impress me, and yeah, we would have won more often than not. But we talk about this. We warn people who, Aussie guys who watch us and don't watch the NFL too much, that quarterback is the most important position in team sport.
Yep.
So when you get your starting quarterback, and Wentz had a great year, out after 9 plays in the first half, that's such an unlucky event to happen, and that makes it such an uphill battle. And you know what? They didn't punt after that. The Eagles never punted in the second, third, or fourth quarter, so they still moved the ball. It was just a problem that they had to keep kicking 3 instead of getting in the end zone, and I just talked about how that undid the Bills. And twice they were in scoring range, actually forego the option to kick a 3-pointer and went for it on 4th down and got stopped on 4th and short twice. Which, fair enough, you kick both those field goals, you would have lost by 2 instead of by 8. Like, they needed the touchdown. Ultimately, they couldn't get in. And people in our group were complaining a lot, like, oh, this backup quarterback's so shit. But it is very tough. They had Luke McCown, who's never played in a playoff game before. Was it Josh? Sorry.
Yeah. I'll add, you're right.
And he's 40 years old.
It fucking matters a shitload because I heard that, I know I wasn't looking at live odds necessarily during the game, but as soon as Carson Wentz got ruled out for the game, the line moved 6 points. So the live line moved 6 points. So that pretty much shows you, how big of a difference, like you said, a quarterback makes. And
after all that, as I said, they're down 8. We had plus 2.5. You get that touchdown, you're going to go for 2. We could have covered even if they don't get the 2-point conversion. So we still, when you make a bet and the most horrible thing that could possibly go wrong in the first quarter does go wrong and you still nearly won, it was probably a good bet, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's wrapping up the wildcard round. Let's move on to the divisional round. 4 absolutely cracking games this week. Let's start off. And once again, it'll be Sunday and Monday Australian time. So, another great one for us Aussies. We get to watch at least a couple of games on the Sunday that we don't normally get to. First up, the Vikings plus 7 at the 49ers. 44 points is the total. As you see on the screen, no best bets for us on this one because we are leaning opposite ways. I am leaning certainly towards the 49ers in this one. I do like the spot for them, obviously nice and rested off the bye, whereas the Vikings had to obviously travel to the Saints, get the upset win, and now you have to go on the road again, travel east to west, play in an outdoor stadium, and be a big underdog again. I understand that the lines moved down slightly, partially because probably the market sees the Saints as a slightly better team as the 49ers, and also because of the Vikings' performance last week was very, very impressive. Once again, I will bring up that Kirk Cousins thing. Like we said, Kirk Cousins plays very good in that 1 p.m. time slot. This is not a 1 p.m. time slot. It's a 4 p.m. time slot, so that disrupts his schedule a little bit as well. Not only that, it's not a Sunday game, it's a Saturday game, so that's going to change up his time slot as well. Just crazy stats on Kirk Cousins within the 1 p.m. time slot and outside the 1 p.m. time slot. He covers 65% of the time when he plays at 1 p.m. He covers 33% of the time when he plays outside of that 1 p.m. time slot. So I think that is a pretty important factor. Not only that, the Vikings are, getting a little bit, they are a little bit banged up here. Adam Thielen had the ankle injury. He's re-injured it at practice. Didn't practice yesterday. And not only that, Stephon Diggs, their only other good wide receiver, is dealing with an illness. So that certainly doesn't help the Vikings' chances. I do like that the 49ers are getting a little bit healthier on the defensive end. I know they had a few injuries down the stretch in the back half of the season, so their defense suffered a little bit, but they'll get Dee Ford back this week. They'll get Quan Alexander back this week. So I do like the 49ers here at the 7. I think it's a good spot for them playing outdoors, whereas the Vikings are used to playing indoors. And I would lay the 7. You'd go the other way, though, Jacob.
Yeah, all of those kind of points you made is actually kind of scaring me off what I liked in the Vikings. And pretty much this line is 7. If you like the Vikings, you're going to bet them. I mean, hunt around 7.5 would be great. And conversely, if you like the 49ers, you definitely want to try and lay minus 6.5.
Yes.
With 7 being the second most important margin of victory after 3.
Correct.
And my number one handicap is really what I alluded to before, that I think these are a similar class of teams. I think the Vikings aren't much worse than, say, a field goal worse than the Niners. And I understand, like, it's in San Francisco, they're off a bye, they probably are healthier, of course they're fresher, and it's all those other edges that add up and push this line towards 7. But as I said before, I think the Vikings, just by their circumstances, haven't shown what they can truly do until last week. So I don't think last week was a anomaly or a lucky win. I think it was more of a true showing of their capability. This is a legit side that has the belief, if you can go into the Superdome and win, you can go to San Francisco and win too. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, you've got to mention, first ever playoff start. Like, that's going to count for something, whereas you could say Kirk Cousins got the monkey off his back a little bit. The injuries is a question mark for sure. I mean, Diggs, these athletes, whenever they get an illness, I mean, it never seems to, it's not like a regular human like you or I, where we feel like shit for 2 weeks. Like, they seem to be pretty good. If it hits early in the week, it's rare that it hampers them.
It is a funky one because, like, you know, sometimes, and it's so tough for us to tell as sports bettors, you know, you'll have like an injured player and they'll say, yep, he's playing. And it's so tough to know whether, you know, the coaching staff and the training staff are saying to themselves, all right, is this player 100%? And then, okay, he's going to go. Or do they say to themselves, you know, okay, 70% is enough. So he's going to go in this one. So it's tough to say how healthy he's going to be. But, you know, in saying that, I think he's definitely going to play. Because, I mean, he came out and said, look, I'm feeling fucking crook. But even if I'm 30%, I'll be out there. So he's going to play. It's just
and you factor that in. And even though we took the Vikings +9 last week, like, we didn't know Thielen was going to be himself and have over 100 yards because he'd dealt with a hammy injury the weeks before. So it's all like, and as you say, at this time of year, everyone's a little bit banged up. And I mean, you mentioned that the additions that the San Fran team gets to add to their defense, like, you can't disregard that. Although they have, like, lost their center, I wonder which team, you know, has the better offensive line or which team has the more trustworthy offense. And I feel like a playmaker like Dalvin Cook, he can keep the Vikings in this game. So I can definitely see this game being close, and I think it's going to be a good game, which is why I lean towards catching the 7. But I understand all your reasons why you make that. A lot of little factors do favor San Francisco, why they could win this by a touchdown or more too.
Exactly. And once again, it's the playoffs. The lines are a little bit sharper in the playoffs, and there's only 4 games, so you aren't going to find as much value. The next game is the Titans +10 at the Baltimore Ravens. 47 points is the total. And I think, you know, not many people, would you argue with me, Jacob, if I said that the Ravens were, you know, the best team in the NFL? Would you agree?
No, they are. They are the best team. And how close? We're going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs in a couple of minutes. But you have to say the Ravens are the best team in the NFL for sure.
I think they are. And look, I wanted to find reasons to take the Titans here. Once again, as you see, we've got no best bets on the game. I wanted to find a reason to take the Titans here because catching double digits in a divisional round game, you always like the sound of that. And the Titans defense, you saw what they did last week to the Pats, even though the Pats offense was sputtering, certainly. But whenever you get a team that can run the ball like they did with Derrick Henry last week, and you're getting +10, it certainly sounds juicy. Not only that, you've got, you know, Mark Ingram still, you know, hampered by that injury for the Ravens. He's been great for them this year. And Mark Andrews, who's been pretty much not even a safety valve at tight end. He's been just an absolute monster and a monster in the red zone. He's got the calf injury as well. Ingram and Andrews both dealing with those calf niggles. So, look, I wanted to take Titans +10. I cannot do it. The Ravens are elite, and even if Mark Ingram is hampered, or even if he doesn't go and they get Gus Edwards in, he's been decent. And honestly, this rushing attack does not just rely on the running back here. We know what Lamar Jackson can do at quarterback as a runner, and he's so hard to stop. And it's just, I don't know if this is a good spot for the Titans. You come off, you know, a game in New England as an underdog, have a win. Now you have to go on the road again as a double-digit dog. That's not a good spot in terms of trends, and I just worry. I know Derrick Henry is an absolute monster. You look at the guy, he looks like a fucking action figure. But he had 32 carries 2 weeks ago. He had 34 carries last week, and he's been in the league for 4 or 5 years now, I believe. That's 2 weeks in a row that he's had over 30 carries. He's only had over 30 carries once ever before in his entire career. So it's pretty unprecedented. So, you know, what kind of toll that takes on his body, I know that, you know, it can't be a good thing. I know he's a beast, and he might just run exactly the same as he did the last 2 weeks. But certainly, I wouldn't expect him to be at 100% after taking that many tackles and running that many times. That's for sure. So, but I don't know if I want to lay double digits with the Ravens either, just because, like I said, that they've got a couple of niggling injuries there, and it is double digits. And you can run on the Titans. The Ravens actually have a slightly below average rush defense. So, it's tough to split this one for me.
Yeah, in terms of that matchup, the Titans offense, which I really like, and I said before, it's revolutionized since Tannehill's come in. He didn't even show his ability to be a mobile QB against the Pats, but they played from in front like the whole second half, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They kept feeding Henry, and even though I knew he's a monster and I expected a good performance, I was surprised how many tackles he was breaking and how many people he was running over. This is New England. That shouldn't be the case. And I think Baltimore will do better. I think that they've got a defense that, really swarms to the ball. I think the first month of the season, the Ravens lost a couple of games. They didn't have Jimmy Smith, at cornerback there. They hadn't traded for Marcus Peters. They've really shored up their secondary. And then that allows, I guess, the safeties and the linebackers even to collapse in and stop the run. And the thing about Derrick Henry, if you can stop him, I think you've got to make contact on him early because, as you said, he's such a downhill runner that when he builds momentum and gets past the initial line of defense, it's so hard for those smaller, more mobile backs to stop him. It's not that he beats people, makes defenders miss. He just runs over people.
Carries them with him.
So I do think that Baltimore can mitigate that. And then on the other side of the ball, it's just like Tennessee's a good defense or maybe an average defense. They had a great game last week against New England, but that's a little bit about the deficiencies of New England too. Can the Titans stop Baltimore? I really don't think so. I mean, even if Ingram doesn't play, Gus Edwards is a beast as well. And Lamar Jackson's just a video game in what he can do in terms of in the running game and even in the passing game. I don't necessarily think Tannehill is going to make more clutch throws than Jackson because of the dual threat that he is. It opens up opportunities down the field. That they've had the 2 weeks to game plan. Yeah, they might have game planned a little more for the Pats, but they've known now who they're playing. Deep down as well, the Titans, if you could have told them earlier in the year, especially when they were 2-5, that you're going to make the playoffs and win a playoff game. I mean, you can say they can play this game loose and there's no pressure, and it's like they're going to kind of be happy to be there.
Yeah.
But the Ravens have, very lofty goals this year. They absolutely can't let this one slip. I just think they're going to be so buttoned up, too good, and I think they have an advantage in almost every facet of the game. Maybe not huge advantages, but I just don't see where the Titans get an edge other than if they can force turnovers and play from in front. Because there is a stat that says the average lead that the Ravens have when their defense is on the field is 9 points, which is crazy.
That's crazy.
They're on average, they're up 2 scores. That changes the way the offense plays against them, which makes offense predictable. And the Ravens have really benefited from playing against teams they knew were going to throw. They love to blitz and then they force turnovers. And I guess if the Titans could somehow play from in front, so maybe the way to bet against the Ravens, which we're not going to do, we think they'll win, the way to bet against them might be to take the Titans halftime full-time or take the Titans in a race to points markets because if they don't start well, I don't see how they come back in this game because then that kind of negates how many times you can run Henry, who's their best player.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, if you told me that the Ravens are up at halftime, I see very little hope for the Titans to actually win the game. And to put it simplistically, I know you like to say this a lot, Jacob, but it's like even when you get a double-digit dog or any underdog for that matter, do you think that they can actually win the game? And in this case, I see no scenario in which I actually think that the Titans can win this game. So I'm not tempted to take the +10. I know last week with the Vikings, we said, yeah, sure, there is definitely a chance that the Vikings can beat the Saints. And I know that both of us, we bet the Vikings straight up ourselves. But in this case, there's no way that I would actually be betting the Titans to win this game. I just don't think there's a chance that they do. Next up, the Texans +9.5 points at the Chiefs. 51 points is the total. Should be a really fun game. 51 points is a high total for a playoff game, but it's warranted in this one. The Texans and the Chiefs both with below average defenses, and you've got Pat Mahomes up against Deshaun Watson. Should be a really, really fun game. Can I
ask you one question though? Because you ended the handicap of the Titans Ravens by saying you don't think the Titans have a chance.
Yes.
If you could have either the Titans or the Texans this weekend and you win $1 million if they win, who do you want? The Titans or the Texans?
I probably want the Texans.
Oh, you want the
Yeah,
Texans?
I
I
think.
actually give the Titans more of a chance against the Texans. That's a bit of a spoiler as to why we've got the plays, on the screen right now that we do.
Just because it's 9.5 and the other one's 10, I guess, gives me a slightly high probability of the mill. I think the Chiefs are going to be too good here, and we've said it before that this Chiefs team, and I don't know if they're underrated still, but they have been underrated throughout the season. They've had so many injuries, not only to Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce's been injured, Tyreek Hill's been injured for a lot of the season. Their running backs were injured. Damian Williams was out. They were down to, I think LaShawn McCoy and Damian Williams were out at some point, and they had to go to Darrell Williams and stuff. So this Chiefs team has not been fully healthy all year long. They're pretty much fully healthy now. Pat Mahomes is moving around like he should. Travis Kelce is limited practicing, but he's going to be fine to go. And Chris Jones, who you mentioned, Jacob, is so important to that team, is practicing again in a limited fashion, so he'll be good to go as well. But this Chiefs team is just an absolute juggernaut, and I know we mentioned before that the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. You could make a very, very strong case that this Chiefs team, as it's currently constructed, getting healthier, is right up there with the Ravens, and I truly do believe that. Arrowhead is a great home field advantage. It gets loud as fuck there. And the Texans, although they've had a good season, they won the division. I know that Deshaun Watson made that awesome play in overtime to beat the Bills last week. I really think that, Deshaun Watson, he struggles when they get a little bit of pressure on him. And the Chiefs are pretty much average at getting pressure, but this defense has gotten healthier down the stretch. And just from the eye test, they have played better down the stretch, this Chiefs defense. So I think that they're going to be able to get some pressure on Deshaun Watson. I think the Chiefs are just better, better on offense for sure. I think they have a better defense. And I think that, with a total of 51, you're not as scared to lay close to double digits. I mean, if this total's down near 43 or something like that, then obviously, you start to think, the Texans can't score that many points for the Chiefs to cover. But in this one, I do think there's going to be some points. I think the Chiefs are going to get theirs, and I think they're going to be able to cause one or two turnovers on the Texans. So I think the Chiefs get the job done here. And the Chiefs are, I know you've got a Super Bowl bet on the Chiefs, Jacob. That's not looking too bad at the moment.
And I've been saying for a few weeks, I really felt they represented the best value in any Super Bowl future market. I got 12 to 1, but definitely you could have gotten double digits. Now, I copped a massive break in the Patriots failing to Miami, which has catapulted them into a bye, into home field in this round, which they can't let that opportunity slip. And I'll be shocked if they lose this game.
Yep.
I'll give you a bet possibility because we had a minor disagreement there. You can think about it while I make my case.
Okay.
I'll take the Titans. You take the Texans. If neither of them gets an upset, no bet. If they both get an upset, no bet. But if one of the two get an upset, one of us wins. Because I actually think the Titans have represented a better chance of an upset. We can discuss the terms later.
I'm happy to do that. It's so grim. I'll have to be cheering against our bets in the Chiefs game, which we have the most bets on out of any game.
But you don't have to worry about that because it's not going to happen. I just think, and something else I learned because I liked the Texans last week. I learned they're not really as good as I think. I was really disappointed with them on offense. Now, you can say they missed Will Fuller and he may play, but you kind of know if he couldn't play in that game, he's not going to be, full capability this week, if at all. And as I said before, I didn't think Deshaun Watson made enough plays, and I thought that he could have thrown a ball away a couple of times. Instead, he ends up taking the sack. That could have ended up a lot worse. I think they did put the ball on the ground once or twice and actually recovered. I mean, they could so easily be out right now. I think just because we're on the Texans, I think we're pretty good at being honest with ourselves that we're quite lucky to have cashed, those tickets.
Certainly. Yeah.
And, and I talked about the J.J. Watt sack, and that's going to be publicised that he's a big inclusion. Look, that's a classic case of a guy who comes back early from injury and inspires everyone around him and gets the crowd going. But you don't get that. In fact, it's the complete opposite going into Arrowhead, where now it's a massive advantage to the Chiefs. I think Arrowhead is one of the underrated, super strong home field advantages. Yes. The last time they played a playoff game here, they lost in overtime by the narrowest margin to the Patriots. They honestly so easily could have won that game and so easily could have won the Super Bowl. And you get a giant break, like I said before, in getting that bye when it looked impossible when they were 3 wins back from the Pats. You can't let that slip. You're playing a shitty Texans team that another takeaway I had, they don't tackle. They don't tackle in space. How many tackles did they miss against the Bills? It nearly cost them last week, but they got through.
What showed that the best was when they were up against the Pats, and I understand you're playing prevent defense, but they just let the Pats march up the field twice in a row. Just get two
Yeah,
easy
that's
touchdowns.
earlier in this
Right.
season. And that's right. Another thing, Bill O'Brien, I don't trust him. Whereas Andy Reid, I know that he's made mistakes in key games before, and Kansas City have been upset in playoff games at home before. But he's a mad scientist off a bye. He's going to have the team
19 and
raring to
9 off a
go.
bye.
And he's offensive minded, so I think they're going to be especially on point on offense, which is why we like these player props on their starting running back. I think we get value on Damian Williams because he was out half the year. They went with Committee. They went with LaShawn McCoy at times, Darwin Thompson, even Spencer Ware. But Damian Williams is the best running back they have. He's a starting running back and he can catch the ball. He should put up good numbers. And I just think the Chiefs, they won't let up because they got upset like last year. Either they get a lead, if they get in front, they're going to keep piling it on. Pat Mahomes doesn't get scared. If they're up 10, he's going to say, let's put another touchdown on and make it 17, especially when they watched the Texans come back from 16-0. And the one fear you have taking a minus 9.5, or what did we get? Minus 9 flat.
Minus 7.5 we got.
Oh, that's right. We were going to take
$1.90,
but then we found the 7.5, which I should mention.
Worth it.
Teams are winning by 8 more often these years, and it happened last week with the Seattle winning by 8, and the reason is because teams going for 2 when they score a touchdown when they're down 14, that cuts it instead of cutting it to 7
last week. But you're right, that is a big reason.
Yeah, that adds to the chances. So anyway, minus 7.5. Now, what's going to scare you is if the Chiefs are up 14 in the fourth quarter and Deshaun Watson coming back. But at the same time, because he keeps on throwing and doesn't give up, that can also lead to turnovers, and this could get ugly. I really think the Texans get blown off the park in this.
Yes, and so we've bet accordingly. We've got 5 best bets on the game. Like Jacob said, we found a Chiefs laying 7.5 points. You'll find that one at $1.80 in the Bet Easy Pick Your Own Line section. Like Jacob said, worth definitely buying that down for the 10 cents from 9.5 to 7.5, because a lot of these games, not a lot, but more games than usual, are landing on 8. Chiefs minus 4.5 in the first half. I need to edit that in. But anyway, that's Chiefs minus 4.5 in the first half. That's $1.81 on Sportsbet. The Chiefs team total over 30 flat. That's $1.85 on Ladbrokes and Neds. Like Jacob said, we're taking Damian Williams, starting running back, over 71.5 yards, rushing and receiving combined. That's $1.88 on BetEasy. And we're taking Damian Williams to score a touchdown at any time. That's $2 on BetEasy. Make sure you shop around because those are like $1.80, $1.85 in other places. And the last game of the round, the Seahawks plus 4.5 points at the Green Bay Packers. 46.5 points is the total. And I think we can all agree that the Packers are, I would say, not a huge margin, but I would say by a fair margin, the worst home team left in the playoffs currently. You'd have to agree with that, Jake. I think that the difference, between the 49ers, the Ravens, the Chiefs, I think they're on another level to the Packers.
Absolutely fair. And those 3 teams you mentioned are all bigger than a touchdown home favorite and more likely to win, comfortably. And then this game, we've got a line well under a touchdown and probably expected to be the closest of any this upcoming weekend.
Yes, indeed. So the Seahawks are plus 4.5, like I said. When this line came out, or when I first saw it at least, it was at the 4, and I couldn't understand it. I think the Packers are the better team than the Seahawks, especially now with the Seahawks with their 2 starting running backs injured and Tyler Lockett just consistently banged up. So I've got a line at 4 with the Packers, who I think are the better team in this one, at home at Lambeau, which people argue is worth 4 points, is one of the stronger home fields in the league. And the Packers coming off the bye, which you can argue about it all day long, but it's worth between half a point to 1 point. So I certainly like the Packers in this one. I think this, even though I think both teams are overrated, the Packers are a little bit overrated as well, but the Seahawks are overrated as well. I mean, they went 11-2 in games decided by 1 score this season. So I think that is pretty lucky, and you do want to bet against these lucky teams, and I would consider going 11-2 in close games of being pretty lucky. I mentioned that they lost Carson and Penny, obviously, who were absolutely rock solid for them all season long. Now you get Travis Homer and you have to bring in Marshawn Lynch. Last week, I think they combined for 1.1 yards per carry, which is not going to cut it against this Packers side. And Aaron Jones, who's been absolutely running riot for this Packers side. And not only that, I think that the spot for the Seahawks is pretty average. Last week, you have a West Coast to East Coast travel spot to Philly. And this week, once again, you have a West Coast to East Coast travel spot to the Packers. So really don't like the spot for the Seahawks, like the spot for the Packers. I think they're the better team, strong home field advantage off the bye. I think they should be too good.
Yeah, I love the Packers in this game too. Interesting stat with this one. You look at all the quarterbacks remaining in the playoffs, how many times they've had a playoff start. Aaron Rodgers has 16 previous playoff starts. Russell Wilson, 14. Every other QB in the playoffs, 2 or less. Yeah. So we got 2 staples of the last decade of the NFL. And if you want to say who was the player of the decade in the NFL, probably Brady. But after him, you'd put these 2 right there.
Yes.
They won a Super Bowl each in that time. They've had some classics against each other too. And funnily enough, I think they've met maybe around 8 times. Always the home team getting the victory.
Interesting.
But I remember a crazy playoff win, especially in Seattle, where I think Green Bay was up about 16 and Seattle did like a fake field goal, recovered an onside kick and ended up winning that game. So look, this could be a classic, but I think for all the reasons you mentioned, like let's start with the fact that if home field is worth 4 playing at Lambeau, and don't tell me that Seattle's 8-1 on the road this year, so they don't get affected.
Right.
You know, that it's a small sample size. Go back and look, as I just referred to the last decade. Seattle's exceptional at home. They really get that crowd noise going, and they are just not as good away from home as they are at home. So it's a disadvantage to Seattle. Of course, it's a disadvantage playing a tough game last week. You even go back to having to play the final game of the season on the Sunday Night Football against 49ers. And I agree that the Packers are probably overrated and probably didn't deserve to be 13-3 and get a bye. Let's look at the fact that they nearly blew Week 17 at Detroit to a third-string QB. They get a late comeback win and win that game by, 3 points, I think. Yeah. They beat Detroit by 1 point earlier in the season.
Which they shouldn't have.
They had a goal line stand against Carolina. They had a 5-point win against Washington. This is just off the top of my head. They did win a lot of close games, and the Sharps have loved betting against Green Bay many times. I mean, many times this year we're going, what? Oakland's only getting 4 in Green Bay? Right. Detroit's only getting 3.5 in Green Bay? Like, what am I missing here? The Sharps don't like Green Bay, but I just feel like everything has kept falling their way, including getting the bye for this game, getting healthy. Again, we're actually trying to find more value. I mean, the line play we've got in getting -3.5 is brilliant. Oh, yeah. You're going to sacrifice 2 cents for that. It just shows why you always want to check the pick your own line. And laying 2.5 in the first half, we shouldn't be getting $1.88 for that either. But we're on a couple of player props here too, because you referred to the fact that Seattle, who loves to run the ball, have no running back.
Yep.
And their best wide receiver was Lockett, but he's a bit sketchy. Now, they got Metcalf, who had a monster game last year. But with your deep threat wide receivers, they can be hit or miss. You know, you can't rely on picking up those home run plays every week. What you can rely on, though, I think, is Aaron Jones, a threat as a runner and also, you know, in the backfield catching passes, and Devontae Adams, who's been an exceptional wide receiver in the NFL. I think a little underrated the last few years. This year, very inconsistent, had the toe injury. You'd know he was on your fantasy team, but maybe a concussion, in and out of the team a couple times. It meant that Rodgers had to throw to a bunch of no-names, but Devontae Adams is back in the mix now, and with a bye to prepare, they're not going to starve him of the ball. So I love, you know, getting their best 2 playmakers involved in this one. And I'd be really shocked if Seattle, who's a bit beat up, you got Jadeveon Clowney, who, you know, I don't want to debate the hit that he put on Wentz. I think he knew what he was doing.
I agree.
But he's playing out there hampered with a hernia, essentially. But he's playing out there with a hernia, and he's like kind of their most disruptive defensive line player. They're a bit depleted as well. There's no reason the Packers should drop this one.
And not only Clowney, but this Seattle defense is just not the defense that we're used to. They've been a bottom half of the league defense, not only rushing but receiving as well throughout the season. So I think the Packers will be able to move the ball. We've got 4 best bets on the game. Like Jacob said, we found a great bet in Packers laying 3.5 points. That's in the Bet Easy Pick Your Own Line section. That's $1.88. Snap that one up. I assume that one won't be there for much longer. And neither will the Packers laying 2.5 points in the first half. Also on Bet Easy, also $1.88. Those 2 bets are great. Lock them in. Devontae Adams over 80.5 yards receiving. That's $1.98 on Sportsbet. Good price for that one because it's also the lowest yards in the market. And Aaron Jones, we're taking over 91.5 rush and receiving yards combined. That is $1.98 on Sportsbet. And that is it That is the divisional round wrap. So 9 best bets on over 2 games, only on the Monday Australia time game. So, yeah, certainly. But we will be releasing some multis as well. I know Jacob will be cooking some multis after we get off this one for the pod. And I know that Ladbrokes are doing some promos for every single one of the divisional round games as well. So obviously with the new laws, we can't say exactly what promos they are, but make sure you check them. And we will be releasing probably 4 of those, really, even though we don't have strong leans for the first game. But because of the promo, it certainly makes it positive expected value for those promos. So look, enjoy your weekend, guys. Enjoy the horse races today. I'm actually going to be... You know what I'm doing today, Sakib?
Is it wedding related, mate?
Yeah, it is.
Don't know if people know 2020 is a big year for you.
It is wedding related, and it's like the first fun thing that I've got to do for the wedding planning. We're actually going to taste some beers because we're going to have some kegs of beers there. So we're going to taste some and see which one we want.
Geez, there's worse ways to spend your weekend, isn't there? Yeah, true. I don't know if this weekend of NFL games can live up to last week because we had some all-time classics. Not to mention, we haven't got a single best bet on an underdog this weekend. We can actually foresee a scenario where all the favourites win more comfortably. Although, just knowing the nature of the sport, I think somebody will give us a good game. Hopefully not the Seahawks.
True.
Maybe the Vikings, but we'll see. But it'll be very interesting. And I think we can go even better than last week with our best bets. 5 and 3. Now I've got 9 best bets, so let's win at least 6 of them for the lads, as well as finding gold with some multis, as you mentioned. Even if we don't love a side, we're picking these player props well as well to beef up these multis. So well, it goes without saying, over 100 units and a lot of same-game multis win this year. So you want to have a look at what we share, and we'll be doing that before the games this weekend.
Definitely. Make sure you're in the TryPod app. Make sure you're in the TryPod group, TryPod Punters Tips Forum on Facebook. Jacob posted a multi that was paying over $6 in the NBA 2 days ago. That got up. He's looking to back that one up today. So hopefully you're on it already. Some of those games will be started already. But look, like I said, make sure you're in the TryPod app. Make sure you're in the group, because you'll get a notification for all of those bets and multis that we post up. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Enjoy your weekend. We'll catch you next Saturday.